Hey, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Monday, January 13th, 2025. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Are you doing okay over there, Cody?
Yeah, it said the music was playing, and then for people that don't know, the music starts. We can hear it. We're not in the studio. Music was playing, but nothing sounded, and then it just played the end of the track. So I restarted it, and it still didn't play. So I just had to roll it, and we had to go silent intro. So we are starting this off like the Packers played in the playoffs, and I don't like it.
And we're going to talk about that game, and you can get your gripes out there, as well as all the other games that happened so far in Wildcard Weekend. We'll also preview the Monday night game coming up in the end of the show, and maybe a couple other things, just to have a little bit of fun here. Try to lighten the mood after that game for you, Cody, yesterday. I know last year this was the hardest show for me to do after that Eagles getting destroyed by Tampa Bay. So I feel for you.
Great.
Make sure you follow us at the Couch GMs, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok to get even more than you do from the show. You can always hit us in DMs with any questions you have, or drop it in the comments if you're watching live Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 East. All right, Cody, let's sit back, relax, and chat.
Hopefully it works.
Man, I'm glad it worked, because if it didn't, we were just going to have to sit there awkwardly in silence because we didn't have a graphic to tell us we could chat.
I know. How will we ever know that we could discuss football topics without the sound, the shaky football, and the 3 words, let's chat. That's 2 words. I'm so let's just what's our first
Let's
topic,
chat
George?
and not talk about the number of words that we were talking about. Cowboys. So I had a very strong stance on a subject last week on the show, saying how I don't think the Cowboys would block Mike McCarthy from interviewing somewhere if they don't plan on bringing him back. And then early on Monday, we hear that the Cowboys are parting ways with Mike McCarthy. I was very wrong on this subject.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation. And when you have a guy under contract, like I guess it does give you exclusive negotiating rights. You got to talk through it about through the weekend and decide, do we want to keep you around? Do we want to move on? So on and so on. So it gave you a couple extra days, but you denied an interview request. You missed out on being able to interview coordinators on bye. You now have to wait till their season is done. So and now you're just behind the 8 ball. I mean, we're going to talk about the head coach that already got filled. Other teams have already interviewed 3, 4, 5 guys getting ready to set up the in-person parts of it. So now they're just behind the 8 ball, and it's just another round of questionable moves after a team went in with a head coach on a lame duck contract, didn't really make any free agency moves, and it's just like, okay, Jerry, what's your master plan? Because from the outside looking in, we don't see it.
And I don't know how true this is. The Twitter whispers were basically saying that they parted ways with McCarthy because they couldn't agree on a contract length. Like they wanted to have him back. I'm assuming the Cowboys probably wanted him on a 1 or 2 year deal because they wanted to kind of feel out how it was going to go after some shaky years there. And McCarthy probably wanted longer. But like at some point, you would think if we're committed to this guy, we're going to find a way to make it work, whether it's a contract out or like there's got to be ways to make that happen.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee McCarthy. I mean, he's probably going to get a couple more interviews. I don't know if he'll get a third stop this season. I mean, there is a lot of interesting potential candidates we could talk about here in a second, but yeah, the length thing is interesting to me because if you wanted him for 1 or 2 more years, extend him before the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Because he probably takes a 2-year extension at the beginning or a 1-year extension at the beginning of the season to give him some security for next year. But now he's a free agent. He's starting to test the water. It's the same thing we see. There's no franchise tag with coaches. It's the same thing we see with players. You offer them a contract extension at the beginning of the season, they'll probably take it. You wait to the end, they're getting closer to that open market, pick where you want to go. And McCarthy's no dumb coach. He knows that there's a limitations in Dallas with Jerry running the show.
Exactly. Being a friend with the owner GM only takes you so far if you're out there trying to win championships. And he might end up in a better situation going somewhere and being an offensive coordinator for a year or two, waiting for another cycle to come to him, rather than staying head coach in Dallas, having another year where he may be sitting there ripping his hair out. We don't obviously know how it looked behind the scenes, but it had to be frustrating for McCarthy to sit there last offseason, watching them not re-sign their franchise quarterback, watching them not re-sign their franchise wide receiver, and not make any moves in free agency when you see other moves in your division, in your conference to make teams better.
Yeah. And they're doing the same thing with Micah Parsons. Like, will he be back in Dallas? We'll have to wait and see.
I believe he still has one more year.
Correct.
He
He has
has
one
his
more year.
fifth-year option, but you obviously do not want to let him get to testing free agency, make him angry by franchise tagging, whatever it might be. We see these things never work out for star players.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be a big offseason in Dallas because that team is kind of built to win. They have a franchise quarterback that they made the highest paid quarterback last offseason, one of the highest paid wide receivers in CD Lamb. Their offensive line, though, is an aging. They're not very good. Their defense is spotty at best. So they have some pieces, but they need an overhaul, and they need someone to come in and fix this team. And I honestly don't know, like, I honestly think the Cowboys have a good chance of having a one and done coach next year.
Unless Jerry brings in somebody else who he gives too long of a leash to because he has a personal relationship with. That's the only thing I'm thinking.
I don't know. And again, there's only been one coach position filled, so maybe I'm overthinking the gap. But I don't even know like which candidate makes a ton of sense for them of the big name
Does
candidate.
he give an interview to Kellen Moore because of the connection to Dallas, try to snatch him back from Philly? Does Kellen Moore even want to go back after he felt disrespected not getting the job the last time?
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting. Kellen Moore would be he'd be one I wouldn't think would be one and done. And
Yeah.
as much as you can say disrespected, getting an opportunity to be a head coach, like if he was offered the job, I think he would take it, even though he has something brewing with the Philadelphia Eagles. But like I said, they missed out on being able to interview the hot coordinators out of Detroit. Anyone from, I mean, I don't think Matt Nagy got an interview with the Jets, I believe, but not a lot of chief coordinators have been getting all the buzz. But so we don't really know what's going to happen with Dallas. But because there is the openings, do you think Mike McCarthy gets a rebound spot anywhere? I figured out who. You know what? Hang on, real quick.
Uh-huh.
I think Jerry Jones might pull off John Gruden. That's
You
my.
don't think he's blackballed at this point?
I think there's. I think if somebody could pull him back in, would be Jerry Jones.
I
So that's.
agree. If there's somebody could pull him back in, it's him. I just don't know, like I said, if he's
I mean, he's working
going to
with
be
teams.
given the opportunity after the last, because I mean, he wasn't great in Vegas, but it was the email scandal and all that like controversy around him is the reason why he was fired.
Yeah, that could be my surprise candidate. I think that something like that. I know the buzz is like go get Dion. I still don't think Dion is leaving Colorado college football in general for the pros. But yeah,
Well, just
I
to
think
tie this into other jobs, I've heard rumors that Dion is interested in Vegas. I mean, obviously, I don't think he's leaving college at this point either, but that's something that I've heard going around. And then McCarthy, I would definitely not be shocked if he gets an interview with the Jets. I mean, they're interviewing Rex Ryan. Why wouldn't they interview Mike McCarthy?
yeah, I did hear that the Jets do not anticipate being interested in Mike McCarthy, which I think is just a sign that they're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers because I think Aaron would take Big Mike back. Uh, I think the Bears could be an interesting spot for Mike McCarthy. They know that division; he's beaten up them before. And then the Saints, he was their offensive coordinator before he got the job in Green Bay, so he does have some connections there. So there's a couple places I think they can bounce around to, and it's just like the Saints one, you could get a guy in that, but it's not going to compete for a while. So hopefully you can build around. And honestly, at your third stop, you can take what you can kind of get. But a lot of interesting spots for head coaching candidates.
Definitely. So that makes it, we say 7 total for this offseason, but only 6 now available as the Patriots, shocker right here, sign Mike Vrabel as their next head coach. saw this coming from a mile away. Something that probably should have happened last offseason, but they decided to go one and done with Gerard Mayo first.
Yeah, and we saw it a mile away, and we don't have to get too deep into this topic, but I know the legitimacy of the Rooney Rule has come up yet again. And the only thing I want to bring up about that is the interesting tidbit that I heard over the weekend about this hire in general was I didn't know that you couldn't have uh, in-person interviews until after the divisional round with people currently employed by NFL teams.
I did not know this.
So it's not so you would have to be not employed, but so how they got around it was they interviewed Pep Hamilton, former DC Defenders head coach and offensive quarterback, pretty good quarterback coach, has had some success for play calling, but never, been a guy really in the NFL. And then Byron Leftwich, who's been out of the league for a little bit. So that's how they got around it to get their 2 in-person interviews in, and that's why it questions the legitimacy of the Rooney Rule. But Mike Vrabel was their guy from the beginning. We all knew it. I said I thought he was going to get the job. People are like, they could have had him last year, and I just don't think he wanted to follow Bill Belichick. And now he gets to come in a year removed. He gets a young quarterback, a team with cap space. They're still a couple pieces away, but we've seen time and time again Mike Vrabel gets the best out of his players, and I think that is going to be an interesting team to follow. I do know there is a ton of buzz, though, and I want to get your thoughts on this, of him bringing in offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels. They have a good relationship. Bring him back to New England for a third time. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad move because I think McDaniels is a good offensive coordinator. I just think he is an abysmal head coach. And all of the stops I've seen to prove that. And you can also say maybe he was somebody who was lifted by Tom Brady, similar to how like Belichick is like, is it all Belichick? Is it, some Brady? But there's also something to be said that like I'm sure he even took things from Brady that he's going to be able to use in his coaching experience. So I don't think that's a bad move. It'd be somebody with a lot of experience to try to coach up Drake May. And I like it better than if he was a head coach again.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting move. I'm really intrigued by who he hires as his coordinators, but the Patriots are the first one off the board in the least amount of shocking move possible.
Interested to see if it's like a waiting game now to see if, when the Lions get eliminated, where Ben Johnson chooses and then other people kind of fall in from there, or if we're going to start seeing some other pieces fall, if there's just somebody who likes a candidate, doesn't want to wait, etc.
I think it'll be slower, but I think because he did all the he did like 4 interviews
Mm-hmm.
already virtually, and obviously he can't sign on, but he's probably able to tell his agent, like, yeah, I'm not interested in this team. I'm not interested in this team. Like, not saying he would rule out everybody and say, behind closed doors, I'll use the Jags, for example. Like, I don't think he said, I'm going to go to the Jags. But,
Yeah.
like, he might have said, I got it down between the Jags, Raiders, and Bears. Tell the Jets and Saints thanks, but no thanks. And those teams might move on.
Yeah, that I definitely could see right there. So slow down in some cases, but maybe not with every single team.
I mean, the Jets are probably going to hire Rex Ryan, so he's out in that one anyways. But
We
the
hope
rest
that
of them,
for
I
you.
could see
There you
them
go.
waiting too.
Just realized that was still there.
What?
I changed your background for you.
Oh, why? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Like I said, just a sloppy train car running off the tracks today.
Well, now we're 15 minutes in. We're in a good discussion. Do you want to talk about the games this weekend?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Starting off, Saturday, we had Chargers at Texans, and the underdog won, being the Texans. The Chargers were favorites, but I mean, obviously, seeding had it other way. The Chargers just absolutely fell apart. I mean, they had more interceptions in this game than Herbert hit all season. Where did this come from?
Uh, Again, I keep seeing people talk about the interceptions, and yes, they go against the quarterback, but 3 of them bounced off receivers' hands into the player. So, shout out to the Texans, right place, right time, and they couldn't do much on offense outside of those interceptions anyways. Like, Herbert didn't have a good game. They couldn't get the ground game going, and you could kind of see once the ground game wasn't going, they didn't have the guy that could, make a catch outside of Lad McConkey, who had a really nice day, but no one else stepped up in his absence.
Exactly. So, do you think that this was more of a Texans kind of showing that they still could be a powerhouse team, or was this a Chargers showing that they have been overperforming? Like they're a well coached team that was overperforming and then had a couple bad bounces also.
I think they show that they are an up and coming team, but they aren't a complete team yet. They might have done a little bit better than expectations this year, but they could use some offensive line help. They could use a wide receiver, a tight end. If you don't love Will Disley or and Stone Smart, you could upgrade there. Their defense is pretty good, but they're probably going to lose Khalil Mack, so they could use some edges there. So they're a budding team. I think they're a very similar team to the team that's also in the division that made the playoffs that we'll probably talk about here in a second. They could be back in the playoffs next year, or they could be one of the teams that get replaced. I think they are kind of near the middle of the pack at the moment.
And if you missed the news out there, Khalil Mack is debating retirement. So he might not be back for anybody, let alone the Chargers next season. We'll keep an eye on that as the offseason comes into play. Steelers at Ravens was the nightcap. And I think all of us saw this game from the Steelers coming. They kind of like hung in near the beginning, not really. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you can tell they're a decent team, but they're not at the power that the Ravens are.
Bro, were we watching different games? That was 21-0 at halftime. Then the Steelers finally scored points, and Derrick Henry ripped off a big run.
Fair.
Like, this game wasn't close. This game should have been like 1 o'clock on Sunday or been the Monday night game. So, like, it didn't really matter. Obviously, they weren't going to do that to the Ravens, being, half most likely going to Buffalo the following week. But yeah, that was like the most predictable game of the playoffs. And honestly, it felt like the Ravens started to coast in the second half. They're like, hey, we got Baltimore next week. We're going to play simple defense, not do anything crazy, limit the risk as much as possible. And we're going to go give Baltimore all they can handle. Or Buffalo,
Yeah. I know what
those
you meant there.
beasts.
But yeah, no, the Steelers now ended the season on a 5-game losing streak. Mike Tomlin and the Steelers have not won a playoff game since 2016, and they still haven't finished under 500 in any of those stretches. So after seeing another one and done, you still see the issues that they have. Is there any thoughts of there being a short leash for Tomlin? Maybe not now, but like into next season, even if he keeps finishing above 500, because it's not there.
Pittsburgh is never going to fire a coach midseason, barring a scandal. Something comes out to that being arrested. Pittsburgh's not the type of organization that's going to fire a coach halfway through the season. They're one of the older teams in the league. They're not going to do that. So I don't think he has a short leash going into the season.
Mhm.
But I think the tension's starting to build, and I think they're just going to eventually mutually part ways. And honestly, it's probably best for both of them to make a change now. You could argue now if you want to wait another season, whatnot. But
Mhm.
if I was Tomlin, you don't know what the team is. You don't know if you have a quarterback. Are you going to bring Russell Wilson back? You're not in a position to go up and get a draft one. Do you love Fields enough to bring him back? You didn't trust him to play him like even when he was winning over the guy you brought in. Do you go out and get a Kirk Cousins or an Aaron Rodgers, another veteran? Like, do you play that game another year? I mean, it's definitely an interesting situation. If I was Tomlin, I'd be like, "Hey, let's mutually agree to part ways. It's been a good run. Help you guys reset, and I can go down to the Steelers record book of never having a losing season."
And that's not saying he wouldn't get another job if they do move on from him because, like, I think it's a situation where it's like solid coach. Sometimes you just need a reset. We saw Andy Reid do it. We've seen a lot of other coaches do it where it's like sometimes you just need new scenery, and then all of a sudden you're back to your winning ways. So I think it would be beneficial for both of them to move on at this point too. I do see the cracks forming. I don't think they're going to do it now. I
No,
think if it's going to happen, it's going to be next offseason. Yeah.
I think if it I mean, they did say, uh, how do they word it? It was the plan is to have him back or something like that, but it did sound like it
Mhm.
opened the opportunity to potentially pull off a coach trade,
That
if
would be
somebody
an option if they like see a situation for a quarterback move up or something, maybe.
well, I don't know what they would get in terms because it seems like both teams are parting ways. Like, I don't know if they'd even I don't think a team would give up a first round pick, although the Buccaneers or Broncos gave up one for Sean Payton, and Sean Payton had more is like a Jeff Fisher 2.0 in some situations like that too. So,
And
uh,
he wasn't even coaching their team. They just had his rights or something like that.
right. So maybe he would get a first round pick. I don't think Dallas would do that, but if to be clear, if Tomlin hit the free agent market as a head coach, I believe he shoots to the top of everyone's board,
Mhm.
even over guys like Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, who are the quote unquote hot candidates this year.
I could definitely see that because he has the proven track record of success and he has the experience. Like, I definitely think he would jump to the top. But um, yeah, it's a tough situation in Pittsburgh. I feel like we're going to see another year of pretty much this exact same situation next year. If it ends up being Fields as starting a quarterback and they see some more success, then like maybe that's a little bit of a brighter outlook. But I don't think it's going to finish any differently. And we're going to have this same discussion next year if they don't make the move now. I never thought about the trade situation though, so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think it just really comes down to quarterback at this point. Like who and we have all offseason talk about that. Like, are they a team that would pay for Sam Darnold? Are they a team that would pay for Geno Smith? Like, because
Mhm.
that's their biggest question mark.
And those are probably the best options you're going to see out there. And you can also make the argument of are they enough of a difference maker to put a team over the top?
And
They're definitely good enough to make a team competitive.
they also have to figure out their defense. I mean, they lost 5 in a row, and obviously their offense struggled as well, but they were giving up, 400, 500 yards a game during that losing streak.
Exactly. Something that you're not used to seeing out of a Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So a lot of question marks in there we'll keep an eye on throughout the offseason. Moving on to Sunday, Broncos at Bills. And did you also just get a little bit excited when you saw the Broncos come out so hot, take a 7-0 lead, just for them to do absolutely nothing the rest of the game?
Literally, I was folding laundry and I just threw the game on. I was like, I'll put it on, I'll listen to it, I'll get some chores done before our game kind
Yeah.
of went through. And they hit that deep ball, and I was like, "Oh, are we gonna have a game? Did Buffalo start looking ahead already?" And then even at halftime, it was 10-7.
10-7? Yeah.
They hit the upright on a field goal to tie it, and then Buffalo was like went in, regrouped, and was like, "Guys, this is the Denver Broncos. We are the Buffalo Bills," and just ruined their wild card weekend and sent them packing.
Exactly. And so that was actually probably until the nightcap, the best game of the weekend so far. Except, in the first half. The second half was ugly, but at least the first half was played tight. The Broncos are another team that like I think they did their best. They are a young team, they're up and coming. They're going to hopefully keep getting better and they at least were competitive against you could argue what, worst third potentially second or best team in the AFC. Um they put up a fight. They have some pieces they need to fill too, but they at least have a bright outlook moving forward. And then Buffalo, I had no faith in them coming into the season, and I am very interested to see how these next 2 weeks go for them. Next week, next 2 weeks, however it goes.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, and I think it benefits the Chiefs greatly that they have to play the Ravens. And whichever team wins, like the Chiefs won't have to play, obviously, barring an upset with the Houston Texans. But those teams played 3 weeks ago, and it was not that great. Granted, they'll have uh, Algie Shair on defense this time. He was on a suspension last time, but we'll see how much that makes a difference. If they're super rusty. I was talking to some coworkers today. The Texans coming when they go to play Kansas City, they're going to keep it close. And then that last drive, they're going to fumble, get a kick blocked, throw a pick, deflection, fourth down stop that was 2 inches, 2 chain links short, something like that. And then we'll get Kansas City versus somebody on the following week. But
It sounds like I would like these people.
why would, yeah, I mean, they're great.
This is exactly what I've been saying.
So, no, that's what I said to them. You like
Oh,
me.
okay. Oh, my bad.
They were asking if the Texans have any shot.
I misunderstood who was saying what, but no, yeah. So you're saying exactly what I've been saying, yeah.
Right. You're friends with me.
Yeah,
we're
I
on
hope
the
so.
same page.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we're not.
I don't
But
know. We haven't talked about the next game yet.
I know. But till we get too far ahead, Broncos, Bills. Shout out to the Broncos. They fought back. They made the playoffs. Congrats on them. I mentioned the Chargers. I think they're in the same boat. Bo Nix looks good. They're going to get a bunch of cap space off the books next year. They had the $90 million in cap space or dead cap thanks to Russell Wilson. What they can do with that, how can they gear up and add a couple pieces, to this team. You have to think Peyton's going to look for a running back to use. I think he likes his guys, but they're going to try to find a running back, try to, make that defense even better, maybe look for a corner outside, on the other side of Surtain with Riley Moss in the slot. So a lot of interesting things there for the Broncos, but looking to see how they play next year, but they were no match for the Buffalo Bills.
They were not. They did their best there. We can move on to the second game on Sunday. Packers at Eagles. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So obviously, if you're listening to this show, if you've listened for a long time, I'm a Packers fan. George is an Eagles fan. Friend of the show, Kempy, he's been on a couple times. He's an Eagles fan. Literally, we texted right before the game and said, good luck. All we want is a good game, no injuries, and the refs to not get involved. And basically from play one, that was out the window.
Yep.
People go back and forth on, which team you support is probably more biased. I mean, it looked pretty clear that was a clear recovery. Eagles fans are like, heck no, that's not a recovery. It was a targeting penalty anyways, besides the point. All that to say, and I'll say this again from a Packers perspective, that play hurt them, did not cost them. They had a lot of other questionable calls. From an Eagles side point, you can't feel great that you had 3 turnovers in the first half and had 10 points to show for it. I mean, Jalen Hurts, you definitely could tell he hadn't played for a while. He was definitely rusty in that matchup. How can he respond going up against the winner of the Monday night game next week, although it'll be another home game. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. And for the Packers, they are kind of similar to the Chargers and Broncos. They have some good pieces. Some weeks they look like they can compete with anybody, but they have a couple of things they need to clean up, a couple humps to get over with, and just showed they weren't in that upper echelon of NFC teams despite winning 11 games.
Exactly. And I heard so many mixed opinions about the Packers coming into this game. I was on the side of like, I see the threat the Packers can be. And I know they don't have any flashy names at wide receiver. They don't have,
well, they left the game with no wide
quarterback
receivers.
they had before. They left the game with no wide receivers. But even before that, like, you don't have a Justin Jefferson on the team. You don't have an AJ Brown on that team. You have a bunch of solid guys, but like, but there's things that they've done well, and it makes me think that like, oh, they could have went out there and, made a run. There was definitely that possibility. There was other people that were like, the Packers are such fakers. They lost all of their games to the top 3 in the NFC, and ended up having 6 losses on the year. All of them were Eagles, Vikings, Lions. So you can make that argument. But at the same time, they beat all those other competitive teams that they played. They beat all the teams they should have beat. Like, so there's two ways to look at it. I mean, I'm not counting that loss to the Bears. They kind of played half strength, but um
Agreed. No, but I
there's the Packers are at a weird point where like they could end up, making that next step, finding that key wide receiver, finding a corner that can stay healthy at this point and making a good run, or they could end up going to a bit of a retool. But I will say is I'm going to defend the people that were kind of bashing on Jordan Love. At least you have somebody at quarterback who's going to keep it stable and keep you competitive in pretty much every single game.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I just talked about Jalen Hurts being rusty. There's
Yeah.
no way, shape, or form can you say that was a good game from Jordan Love. And you could question if the injuries, the knee from week one, the groin from the middle of the season, the elbow from last week, did they finally catch up to him? And was it just too much to overcome? Was he not playing with confidence because he was worried about getting banged up?
I
The
think he
offense,
did get banged up again at some point late in the game.
yeah, I think he did too. I think he re-aggravated
Mhm.
something. Uh, he was definitely slow getting up a couple times. Granted, he were on our third string left guard at that point. Uh, so,
Because the
it,
second string got benched even. Like, it was bad.
but even like that situation, you have to be deep in the Packers to know this. That was our rookie 6th round pick that came in. He has not played anything but garbage time all year long. The guy that replaced him has come in spot duty when someone gets hurt. What happened that going into playoffs, we're just going to swap out a guy that's never played versus a guy, granted,
Yeah, that's strange.
one's a UDFA from last year, one's a 6th round draft pick. So it's not like they're high pedigree guys, but it's just like, it's almost like you try to get cute thinking, no, this guy had a really good week of practice. We like where he's at. Or maybe he practiced all week at left guard and the other guy practiced all week at right guard. So you were like, hey, we're going to put him in because they're similar. But, and it wasn't like when the other guy came in, he got much better. Like it was a very frustrating game, especially for Packers fans, and albeit though, that's year 2 of a rebuild off of a Hall of Fame quarterback. You made the
Yes.
playoffs twice. Granted, they were 7 seeds both time. I know if we were still in the 6 seed format, it doesn't feel as good as it does, by missing out. But 7 seeds been around for a while. It's not going anywhere. We made the playoffs. Our records have gotten better. Statistically, our offense and defense is getting better. Defense played lights out, except every time the Packers scored points. That was, I think, the most frustrating thing for me about that whole game was if you look at the scores, the stats, the statistics, looks like the Packers played their best defensive game of the season. And you know what? They probably did.
I
But
think they did.
when it was 10-3, what happened? Went right down and gave up the score.
Yep.
They got it to 10-16. What
Yep.
happened? They went right down and let them get up the score. It was like the 2 drives we needed to do the most, you fell short. Granted, you played great the rest. So it was definitely a frustrating game. But I want to know from your perspective
Mhm.
as an Eagles fan, with how inconsistent the team played, are
Yep.
you willing to chalk that up to rust, or are you concerned about playing the Rams or Vikings next week?
I'm concerned about playing the Vikings next week. I'm not so concerned about playing the Rams next week. And I think the reason is this. The Packers did the one thing that you can do to slow down the Eagles. And I know it didn't always translate on the field. Like Jalen Hurts' opening touchdown pass, he had 6 seconds in the pocket. But once they started bringing pressure, adjusting their rush schemes, they were getting a lot of pressure. The pass game didn't work. The run game was limited. Yeah, Saquon ended up with 120 yards. 20 of them came on the last play of the game, but he took a long time to get to that 100 yards when you consider how explosive that run offense
He
is.
got it to play before the explosive one.
Exactly. So he had like 124 yards, and 101 of them came before that last play. But it was like 25, 26 carries to get to that. That's not, you know, good when you consider how Saquon's been efficient this season. That formula, I mean, number one, props to the Packers defense for being able to come up with that, but the Rams can't stop the run. Saquon's best game of the season came against the Rams for pretty obvious reasons. Once Aaron Donald left that defensive line, they just haven't been able to quite fill that spot yet. But the Vikings have a very solid defense all around. And I think that that's going to be the formula to try to stop the Eagles. And I think one, rust might have been something to do with it, but both receivers not being at quite 100% doesn't help either. And having them banged up, not having, Hurts on the field for going on a month, that pass offense has a lot of work to do in practice this week if they want to be able to adjust and win games down the stretch here in the playoffs, because teams are going to take that Packers formula that was used this week of put 7 guys on the line of scrimmage, not even in the box, on the line of scrimmage, rush any 5 or 6 of them, put Jalen under pressure, make him make his blitz reads in the pass game, and just try to stuff Saquon Barkley. And that's the only way that teams are going to have a shot to beat them at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation on see how it play out. Did you see though? Hertz made history. Did you see that stat?
I did
Which is
not.
it's kind of mind blowing. Hertz in this game took his first ever drop back that wasn't play action or an RPO, just a straight drop back pass.
I did actually see that. Yep. In his whole career. This man's been playing since 2019.
Yeah.
2020. My bad. He was drafted in 2020. That's it. I noticed that. And I didn't think about it in the moment. It was actually part of one of their touchdown drives that they ran that play. And afterwards, you kind of look at the play and you're like, something doesn't look right there. Like, he looks a little awkward. It's something we've never seen from him before, and it feels wrong. But there was apparently 2 passes that he ran that were considered straight dropbacks without, play action in 2020, but they were both bootlegs. So I still don't count it. It was a straight drop back, hit your back foot and pass. And it's not something that he does, but maybe that's the formula, doing things that are kind of off script for how he's been to try to get the offense going down the stretch. If you can make him comfortable with it as you get, him back up to speed.
I don't think more of that is the solution for Jalen Hurts.
You're still going to play most of the time out of the shotgun, but they're playing a lot more under center having Saquon Barkley back there.
Right. And I get that. But I think Jalen Hurts has his limitations as a passer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the play actions, the RPOs help open things up for him. And, it also works best with your offense. Like, teams should play action every play, in my opinion. Like, every play should look like a run. Yeah, I don't and that's why I'm probably a dude that watches the games on my couch and not in the press box as a coach. Is I would I would look like I'm running the ball every play and pass, 50% of the time. But every play will be play action.
Yeah, just even if it moves a linebacker a step, that can be the difference in how the NFL and how tight the game's played. So I agree. Like, play action, you have to build on a run game to get play action, but like, play action can still be effective every
You don't even need a run game.
No.
You just have to continually run. Even if you're only getting 1 or 2 yards, but you keep doing it, it'll still make the linebackers think. You don't need an elite running back. Dude, speaking of elite running backs, I just want to apologize to you, Josh Jacobs. I was never the biggest fan of you. This year, you made me fall in love with you. And I so bad wish that touchdown run was not the most Philadelphia thing and actually down at the 1. Because I would love to see that touchdown highlight all off season, but it will get lost because it was just another play.
I would still watch it with you. That was a heck of a run. And mad respect to Josh Jacobs for showing out when he had an opportunity with a competitive team, because he hasn't been on a competitive team since he's been in the NFL.
And also shout out to him in his exit interview. I probably didn't catch this. He was like, we got a lot to learn for. And he was talking about it sucks because, it's a new team. It's not going to be all the same guys. But he's like, I'm be talking to some people about coming here. Now I'm like, Max Crosby, you are a Green Bay Packer. So you heard it here first.
We will clip that and save it for March. March. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
March. And we'll see what happens. One more game. that has already happened. We got Commanders at Buccaneers, and this was the tightest game of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to let you carry it. I watched the fourth quarter, so if you want to talk about anything besides the fourth quarter, you go ahead.
No, I actually basically just want to talk about the fourth quarter, so that's totally fine. But I basically just want to talk about how this Commanders team is so much different than the teams of the last few years. And part of me wants to say it's luck because you've seen so many things happen. The Hail Mary play. I mean, in this game, a doink and in. You've seen, but there's just so much fight in this team. And I don't want to toot my own horn a little bit, but I'm going to go back and be like, I was a year early when we were last year in the preseason. And we talked about how like excited that Commanders team looked when they broke Baltimore's preseason win streak. And we're like, this team's kind of got some heart now. And I think they're actually going to play pretty well. And then they didn't. But now this year, I think we're seeing the building of that culture that hasn't been there in Washington in how many years. And then that along with good quarterback play with Jaden Daniels. I don't think that this is their year. I don't think they're going to get past next week, but I just wanted to like give the shout out to them for being as competitive and playing with the fire that they have been this season.
Yeah, I would not sleep on them pulling off the upset in Detroit. Maybe you could say you're a Packers fan, you just don't want Detroit to win. But they're very similar teams in the sense they never punt. So the punter's going to have their week off because Detroit's not punting either.
No.
And there's some interesting storylines about this game. You know, whether it's the young and upcoming team, we talk about the defense. You know, the most of the running game though does come from Jaden Daniels. It doesn't come from the running backs. But can they keep that offense off the field and tire out the defense? I think that's something they are capable of doing. But if we go back to last year at this time, I guess it would be 2 weeks from now when the Lions got eliminated. Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, everybody knew Washington wanted him. They
Yep.
got the new ownership group. They got Washington one of them. He turned him down. People forget they turned him down because he was like, I don't think these new owners know that much about football. They're basketball guys, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not knowing how much the front office, Dan Quinn feeling like an afterthought, feels going up against the guy that turned this team down. Could that be a rallying point for this team? Because you mentioned it, Dan Quinn, they brought in guys like, yeah, they got Jane Daniels, who's been electric, but guys like Terry McLaurin, who's been there and fighting through it all. They brought in Bobby Wagner, like a pure veteran that just knows how to win. Austin Eckler, another veteran they brought in. They brought in
Zach Ertz, who caught a touchdown in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, like they brought in these guys to help this young team flourish. They have a good defense that can stop the run. I do think this game, like, don't get me wrong, I would not be surprised the Lions are favored by 7 heading into this game. I don't know what the actual line is. I'm not saying it's a likelihood of the Lions losing, but I think this game is going to be closer to how we felt about Chargers Texans. Like, yeah, the Chargers are the better team, but like we wouldn't be surprised if the Texans won, and the Texans did. Compared to like looking at this game like Broncos Bills, we're like, how did the Broncos even win this game? At least that's how I'm viewing it.
Yeah, and it seems wrong just because we like look at it historically and like the Lions have this build up and they're this super team at this point, but they're banged up on defense. They've been giving up a lot of points lately. There's not much they can do about that. They're going to win in a shootout, and that's how they have to win. The Commanders, they are what you can consider a mishmash of players that were not really wanted by their teams anymore, but you have a lot of successful experience on that team, like you said. There's 10 starters on defense in Washington that weren't on the roster last year. You brought in key offensive players, like you said, like Ertz, like Eckler, like Zacchaeus. You have the young quarterback balling out. Like, I almost, as much as I don't think the ceiling's there that they're going to finish it, I think that they have the possibility to keep upsetting teams still for the next week, potentially 2 weeks. Like, I have to admit that I was wrong on how good they were. But there's going to become a point where it's like I think the mountain's going to be too high for them to ascend.
I know it's his rookie year, but this and maybe this Commanders team is starting to feel a little bit to me like the Bengals team that made a Super Bowl run. They had a young quarterback.
Decent comparison.
They kept winning these games that you never you didn't think they were going to go into Arrowhead and win. You didn't think they were going to beat Buffalo. They barely escaped the Titans. Or was that that was the year they
Yeah,
barely
they barely
escaped.
skipped. Burrow got buried 9 times and they won.
Right, everything was and they just kept building and building, and they rallied together. And I think that could happen with this Commanders team. I think it could be a lot of fun to watch. I think honestly the biggest thing for me in this upcoming game between Commanders and Lions, I know we'll talk about that on Thursday, and I'll repeat it then, is which coach goes for fourth down when they shouldn't. Because they are the two most aggressive coaches at going for it on fourth down going into this game.
I think that is a great way to put it. And I'm going to table the discussion there, and we can talk more about that on our Thursday show. Quick hit on the Buccaneers side of the ball, because since Brady left, this seems to be their reality. They're a good enough team to win their division. They're actually fairly competitive. I mean, I was kind of worried about the Eagles having to play in them in the next round because they have a solid defense. They have that experience. A lot of these guys are still holdovers from those Super Bowl teams, and they just can't get it done in the playoffs. This year, obviously, a little bit more disappointing. They, went out in the wild card round. Last year, they got a wild card win and then took the Lions to the brink. But where does there become the point where they think about hitting the reset button?
Not this year. I mean, they're going to live and die by their quarterback. Baker Mayfield is one heck of a quarterback. He's fun to watch, and he just happened. It's almost funny. Baker and Jameis are very similar.
Fair.
Baker has more heart and grit. Like he's going to run through a dude than you see with Jameis. But they'll put up 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 4 picks any given.
It's true.
I'm pretty sure Baker finished tied with interception leads on the season. But he also, threw a bunch of touchdowns, got his team some wins, big games. He's a lot of fun. And I think they're going to, as long as he's there, they're going to be competitive. They play an easy division. I think it's going to be interesting too. And they lost their offensive coordinator last year to be the Panthers head coach. Liam Cohen steps in. Their offense looks pretty good. They were banged up for in the middle of the season. They lost both their star wide receivers. They fought through. They made through some adversity. I'm probably still going to pick the Falcons or someone else to win the division next year, but they're going to be right in it to the end. And I don't think it's time to, blow it up. I know some people are done with the Todd Bowles experiment. They'd like to see someone else, but he coaches a really well defense. And literally, if Cansey grabs the jersey instead of the towel draped out of his jersey, they probably stop the Commanders on third down and are able to. They'll probably still make the field goal, but then get the ball back for Baker. So,
True.
that one play, obviously, there's a lot of plays that go into deciding a game, but that one at the very end, if Baker walks down and wins them the game because the defense made the tackle, are we having this conversation? No, we're not.
It's very true. And I will say, on top of that, I do think Baker had his best season of his career. Consistently, he put up numbers. He did tie for the league lead in interceptions with Kirk Cousins, which is funny because Kirk didn't even play the entire season. Also funny that Jameis Winston 12 to Baker's 16. And Jameis Winston played not even half the season. But anyway, I do think that there's still some chances for the Buccaneers to have a couple of shots in the next few years. It's just tough because if you look at the AFC versus the NFC is good and they're deep. The AFC, not as deep of a conference right now.
And that could all change next year. if the Cowboys don't pick it up, the Buccaneers take a step back, the Packers don't rebound like we expect them, Sam Darnold moves on and J.J. McCarthy's not, and you get teams like the Chargers, you get teams like the Broncos stepping up, you get the Bengals back in the mix. Like, next year, we could be saying the same exact thing about the AFC.
It's very true. A lot of young talent in the AFC that we have to keep an eye on. All right, one more game yet to happen, kicking off in about an hour. Let's talk about Vikings at Rams in Arizona. Just one more quick shout to everybody out in LA who is dealing with the fires, and hope everyone is doing okay. We hope everything gets wrapped up soon.
Exactly. And George, just so you know, this is our last Monday night preview of the season.
It is. No more Monday night games, which, I mean, partly it's the playoffs. I don't think there should be a
Eliminate the
Monday night
Monday night
game.
game. Yeah, let's just
Yeah.
eliminate it.
Let's go back to 3 on Saturday. That's totally fine. I don't
Ex-
care.
Especially with this year, too. Obviously, it's a tragic situation. No matter what, a team, Rams, Vikings, whoever wins, has to then fly home and then go on a short week and play the early game on Sunday.
Yes.
Granted,
Basically across the country or halfway across the country.
yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, you can't base it on like geographical because, if the Buccaneers win, you know, they're, I guess they're still going across the country. So you can't mess with
They're going to
geographical.
Detroit. Like Minnesota wouldn't be a big play, but still.
But, like, there's a lot of things going on that, like, we should just get rid of the Monday night game. Like, I get why they do it. Like, we got 5 straight days of playoff football if you want to count college football. It looks great on paper, feels like a great time. And honestly, like, I guess the only benefit of it is they tend to do a good job of picking I think it's always been a 4-5 matchup. So in most likely situations, or no, it would have to be, it wouldn't be the most likely situation. They would go play a 2 seed. But it seemed, because there is that one sub, they seem to go that way. So it's like almost like we got rid of the bye, but we'll give you a team on a short week, 2 seed if things go how they're supposed to.
Yeah, normally they would end up playing a 1 seed, which then I guess the argument would be we're giving the 1 seed a bigger advantage, but
Yeah.
that's tough.
But Vikings Rams in Arizona, I think this game is going to be a fun one. How does Sam Darnold bounce back? How does this Vikings team bounce back? Matt Stafford has the playoff experience. He's one of those guys you don't want to really play because he can turn on at any moment. But this Rams team hasn't, scored more than 20 points in their last 4 games. So they also got a bye last week to get a little bit healthy because they didn't play anybody. So it was a fake bye, but they got a bye. So
Yep.
this should be a lot of fun. The over-under is 47.5. The Rams are actually 2.5-point dogs despite being kind of at home. And, yeah, I guess the biggest thing to see in this one is how does the Rams do against this Vikings defense? Because I think this Vikings defense is really good.
Yeah, I kind of like the under in this one because the Rams offense, like you said, Stafford, he has the playoff experience. They have Cup, they have Nakua, they have Kyron Williams. They haven't been able to get it going. And against the Vikings defense, if you tell me that they're just going to snap a finger after a, pre-manufactured bye and turn it on against the number 1 statistical defense in the NFL, I'd be like, don't know about that. The Vikings, we have to see how Sam Darnold rebounds. And I think this is a good situation for him to rebound in because they can probably lean on the run game a little bit more, get Aaron Jones, get Cam Akers going, try to find him some, nice, easy looks to get back into a rhythm, build him some confidence going into next week. But I don't think it's going to be a lot of points coming from that side of the ball either. Like, if you tell me this game ends 17-13, I think that that's about fair.
Yeah, I think the Vikings can score more points than that, but maybe I think it's going to be, can the Rams do enough to keep up against that defense?
I could also just be down on Sam Darnold right now. Like, they could put up 24, no problem. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I'm trying to look up real quick though if there's any major inactives for this game. Uh, I don't recall any big names. I mean, Daniel Jones was the third quarterback. If that,
He's on the
if that
active roster now. Yes. Um, I guess while you finish looking that up, I'll
yeah,
just
there's no one.
start. All right, good. Just the last little question, because I mean, you mentioned it's in Arizona. You don't think that's that like they're kind of at home. The Rams already have a weird situation because they don't really draw a major Rams heavy home crowd. I think the Vikings probably would have, had a good majority of that crowd regardless, but does taking this game away from LA, a lot of people dealing with things in LA that maybe, can't make it to Arizona in this case. Maybe there's a couple extra Vikings fans. Do you think that that takes something away from the Rams despite being the home team?
I don't think the amount of visiting fans takes anything away from this because this is a very young team with elite veteran leadership and Matt Stafford, Cooper Cup. Like they're not going to worry. Like the noise isn't going to affect them. Like, and I think that'll be they'll be able to overcome that. And like you mentioned it, they've played enough games where even in their home stadium, they're hearing the opposing team chants. So could a skull clap start going while they're on offense? Absolutely. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see too, just because of having to move it there. Is that a rallying point to get the fans out there to support their team, or like you mentioned, is there just bigger world problems going on? Because at the end of the day, it's just a football game.
Exactly. And we've seen both sides of the coin here where maybe the Rams come in distracted and don't perform super well. Or maybe we see a situation where it's a rallying cry where they kind of come together and they play for the greater LA area and they really try to put together a strong showing. And maybe even a run comes out of it. We'll see.
We'll see. I think it's really interesting that if the Vikings win, we could either have an all NFC North or an all NFC East championship.
That's very true.
It would
Um,
eliminate two conferences in whole.
and every time the Eagles have made the Super Bowl, they've played the Vikings on the way. So I'm Skull Vikings tonight, but that's just my home bias right here.
I don't know if we can ever be friends again if you say I'm Skull Vikings ever again.
All right, cool. We have a couple minutes. Do you want to talk about some fun experiment that me and you and the two Tylers have been doing?
Yeah. This last minute thing that we stole from a TikTok that we saw online, and
Yeah.
sorry that I can't give the creator original content. Um, but yeah, just so we try to have a little bit more fun with the fantasy, play fantasy, have more fun with the playoff games. We basically did a 10 player,
hmm
for coach, GM, owner, however you want to call us.
4-man, I think is how we usually say it in
Yeah,
fantasy.
4-man, 10 player roster fantasy. It's basically I'm calling it fantasy playoff best ball because that's basically
hmm
what it is. If you've been around long enough, we used to do the playoff challenge with the listeners, and friends and family and stuff like that. NFL stopped doing that, so we found this way to do it. Um, but basically, the roster is 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. That's how you get the 10. We did a snake draft, random order, picked the teams. Uh, and the other caveat was you can only pick one player from one team. So George went Saquon with his first pick, which meant he couldn't come around and get Jalen Hurts or AJ Brown if he so choose. I went with Patrick Mahomes with my first pick because I didn't really want any of the other tight ends, so I locked the Chiefs in there. Uh, there is no double extra scoring like there was in playoff challenges. It's just straight through. So I had Josh Jacobs on my team. Surprise, surprise. He's getting zeros the next 3 weeks. I know it. It's already in our spreadsheet. I got to look at it. And then it's the cumulative points at the end will be the winner this year. It's just for fun. If we like it, maybe next year will be for something else. But yeah, it's a fun experiment. George, anything else to add?
No, it's something we'll keep you guys in the loop with, and we can share with you guys as this keeps going. Cody kind of gave you the quick rundown. If you guys want to like get together 3 friends and do it, for the rest of the playoffs, I'm sure you could just knock off a couple roster spots, knock off a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, a tight end, and probably run it back with 6-man rosters.
You could also, it would be really interesting too. Like, just if you haven't did it and you're like, that sounds fun, run it the same way. Do you pick Lad McConkey for his big game, but knowing he's not getting anything else? Say
That's very true.
Josh Jacobs had a pretty decent game. Do you take him or do you take Justice Hill? Like, that could add a whole nother wrinkle if you backtrack the points as well.
It's very true. And this kind of comes back to, I haven't heard this one come up in a while, but teams that draft, regular redraft leagues either after week 1 or during week 1, but the scoring starts in week 1. And you kind of can, decide, do I want this guy who had a big game because I think he's going to have a big rest of the year? Do I try to take that week 1 win, but then maybe he duds and it wasn't worth that draft pick? Like, yeah, that's actually a good point. Some of these guys that got eliminated didn't have great games. You have to figure out where they would fall in your rankings.
For sure. And we'll let you know how it goes, and hopefully you can join the experiment. I know you had one other thing you potentially wanted to share. You good with that, or you want to save that for next time?
We'll save it for next time.
A little bit of a tease. I love it, George, but that pretty much wraps up not super wild card weekend. Don't know why we changed away from
Oh,
super
the
wild.
Eagles rally towel still said super, so someone didn't tell them.
Well, maybe next year we'll be back to super wild card weekend, but you don't have to wait till next year to hear from us. We'll be back Thursday getting you ready for all the divisional matchups and breaking down all those games, figuring out who wins on Monday night. We're not going anywhere. Mondays and Thursdays, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, talking fantasy football, regular football, all that good stuff. I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kerr. We'll be back later this week to talk more football.